Merry meet, Annie here. There was a subject on Pagan Perspective last week. It was Subs Week, and I loved the subject, so I'm going to be sure and add it to my personal channel. And the question came from Leon, Mr. Aban. And he said, do you use the term priest or priestess within your respective paths? How do you see pagan priesthood and clergy developing, giving the plethora of paths and traditions out there? Please explain any terms and roles you might feel defines a priesthood. It's a fascinating question. I'm fascinated with the simpleness of the question about what it means to us, and I'm also fascinated with the expansion of that question to what does this term, or does this term apply to our way forward in the pagan community? So let me begin by what does it mean to me. The word has a lot of power to me because I am a traditional Wiccan. Therefore, the term priestess or priest refers to someone who has reached a level of experience, a level of maturity, and has devoted their self to community. A priest or priestess in circle can at the same time have a truly personal experience in that circle. Wow, they call it priest mind and priestess mind, while at the same time being outside of their personal experience and be in the flow of what the ceremony is for those who are in attendance, intimately connected to the energy of others in circle and able to facilitate that. Facilitate and facilitator is probably the word that I would put into that role, describing it more than any other word. The ability to be fully present and personally involved in what's happening, but at the same time facilitate, be aware of what is going on around you. Now, I was told that was called priestess mind as I was being trained to be a priestess. The ability to always hold the interests of the circle before my personal interests. Now, does that mean that I think that as a priestess in a tradition that had a very set series of knowledge gained and experience gained, maturity expected, and leadership ability expected, does that mean that I think then that is what a priestess is? That's part of it, when one is priestess in community. And forgive me if I keep saying priestess because I'm speaking from my personal experience, so therefore I'm a priestess. However, I'm also a priestess when it is just me, alone, doing my solitary rituals. And in that case, I see priestess, and therefore I would see priest as one living in devotion to something, living in service to something. And that has nothing to do with community. It has to do with one's relationship and devotion to the old ones, the old gods, or even being in service to a spiritual thing, a devotion, an action, a life, which leaves me, as a solitary, very much a priestess, because I am devoted to my gods. I'm devoted to living a life which reflects my spiritual beliefs. It's an attitude of devotion and not separating oneself from that pure and constant devotion. Now, does it mean that I think that every solitary, therefore, is a priest or a priestess? No, I do not. I believe arriving at calling oneself priest or priestess is the moment at which you decide that you are living your life in service to some sacred commitment. And then you are unswerving in that devotion. It means you live your spirituality every moment to the best of your absolute ability, not swerving and being devoted to what you have dedicated yourself to. It's always having the time for your devotions, always being focused, always being in full relation to the whatever it is that you have devoted yourself to. It's knowing who you are, what your life path is, and staying on it, staying devoted to it. It can be that you have a devotion to deity in some form. But I have found also that a priest and a priestess can also be someone who has devotion to a certain way of living. That their spirituality is expressed through the way in which they live their life and the things they choose to do and devote themselves to, even at the mundane level. So I see priest and priestess, both at the solitary and at the communal level. I don't so much see priest and priestess at the solitary level as being clergy. I see them more as devoted, dedicated, committed. And it's very personal, I think, that it's a relationship between you and the gods or the service you have dedicated yourself to. I do see that with priest and priestess in community, that the aspect of clergy does come into it, tending to the needs of community, often, to my experience, putting the needs of community before your own needs. So there are times in our lives when we can be priest and priestess in community, and there are times when we must focus on the smaller circles in our life and those who need us that way. Another part of Liam's question, which I thought was so powerful, was, given the plethora of paths and traditions out there, how do we see pagan priesthood and clergy developing? And that's an interesting one. But when I look around at all the traditions that we hold as pagans, I see those, no matter their age, who I would consider wise, elders, leaders, mentors, and guides. I think the power in the priesthood going forward in the pagan community is not so much about your private practices, the religion you have devoted yourself to specifically, say someone to me who is a devoted Wiccan. I don't see it so much being about that when it comes to the wider pagan community. I do think that it very importantly is and needs to be, and become ever more so, we acknowledging the experience and the wisdom that is available throughout all of our experiences of being a modern pagan. Breaking down of the bridges, more or less, to understand that the wisdom that is available is there for all of us, that the elders and leaders and wise folk from amongst all these traditions are the leaders and elders and wise folk for all of us. I would be so much lesser if I had not, through the wider pagan community, met wise people from paths different than the one I have personally devoted myself to. Oh, what they have brought me, what they have taught me, how they have inspired and moved me. They have transformed me. I do think that the power of the priesthood going forward in our pagan community is respecting the wisdom that is spread across all of our traditions. Now, if I may add also, it is also, to my mind, very important that there be a mentoring and a bringing up, a coaching, and an elevating to leadership within each of our individual paths, those who can be seen as leaders, those who can hold community at a higher level than they hold their individual personal needs, who can totally release ego to the greater good. I see a powerful place remaining in individual traditions, and in fact, if I may speak as a traditionalist, we need to be sure within the cloistered environment of our individual paths and our individual circles that we are holding true to the priest and priestesshood, which is very specific to our individual paths. I want to see leaders continue to come up through all of the many forms of modern paganism that are specific to that form and wise in that form and are bringing us, because they have been taught by those who come before, the power of that form. Going forward, I see the priesthood being important to preserve intact the threads that run through the more traditional forms of paganism. I see it important in the wider community and our respect for each other as truly a multi-faith community with wisdom to be gained from every one of our paths and the leaders that inspire us in all of them, and also the power, always the power, for those of us who have devoted ourselves in service to the old ways and the old ones, who can in the privacy of our own homes be priest and priestess. I wish you all mirth and reverence. Merry part.